session 107, Genesis 1, and we are now at verse 53. And the 7 years of plenty that was in the land of Mitzrayim had ended, and the 7 years of scarcity began to come, according to what Joseph had said. And the scarcity was in all the lands, but in the land of Mitzrayim there was bread. And when all the land of Mitzrayim was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said to them, Go to Joseph. Whatever he says to you, do that. And the famine was all over the face of the earth. And Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Mitzrayim. And the famine grew very severe in the land of Mitzrayim. So here we see that Joseph was totally in charge of everything, and he had stored up, as he said to Pharaoh, in the 7 good years. He stored up everything he could into the storehouses, into the storages. And when the famine started, he was ready, and he could start selling food to the people. And we know that in the beginning, people still had money. If we think about famine in our country, if we had to start running out of food, and if we had to start running out of, if the shops started running empty, eventually you'll waste all your money on buying food wherever you can. And when your money is finished and the food is finished, what would you have to trade for food for your family? And that's exactly what happened in Mitzrayim, in Egypt. Joseph basically made sure that Egypt became the most wealthy country in the world at that stage. Joseph probably made quite a lot of money for Pharaoh by selling the food he had. And when people's money started running out, people started selling their land. And that's why Egypt were becoming very wealthy, because people were selling their land and their farms to them. And eventually when the land was sold out and there was no more land to sell to Pharaoh, people started selling themselves as slaves to Pharaoh. And that's why when we see when Israel eventually became slaves in Egypt, there was also a lot of other people, other nations that were also slaves. It wasn't only the Hebrew people. If you remember Caleb, that together with Joshua, went into the promised land as one of the 12 spies. Caleb became the leader of the tribe of Judah, but he wasn't a Jew. He wasn't a Hebrew. He was from another nation, but he was also a slave in Egypt. And this probably happened because their fathers started selling the children as slaves to Egypt in exchange for food. So, verse 57, all the countries came into Mitzrayim to Joseph to buy corn, because the famine was so severe in all the lands. So yeah, it's quite sad, but due to Joseph being a Hebrew, he made Egypt very, very rich. And Egypt ended up being an enemy to the people of Israel. So it's a bit of an ironic situation. Let's jump to chapter 42. So when Jacob saw that there was corn in Mitzrayim, Jacob said to his sons, Why do you look at each other? So when you start having no food, you start looking at each other, wondering what you're going to do. And Jacob said to his boys, they have to go down to Mitzrayim. And Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy corn in Mitzrayim. And this is quite significant. You know by now that we've discussed the 10 northern tribes. So the number 10 always would symbolize the 10 northern tribes that eventually got scattered all over the earth, while the 2 southern tribes remained in the Judea area. But here we've got a picture of the 10 tribes in spiritual starvation in their exile. So while the 10 sons symbolizes the 10 northern tribes, which basically symbolizes all the Gentile nations, they were in starvation. And Joseph, who is a prophetic picture of the Messiah, was able to provide them with food. And they just had to return to Joseph, although they didn't know it was Joseph. Remember, Joseph is now looking like a pagan sun god to them. So they don't even know that it's Joseph, their own brother. Just like the nation of Israel today don't always recognize Yeshua as their brother. Especially the Jewish people, they look upon this Messiah of the New Testament and they don't recognize him as being part of the Hebrew nations, but yet he's the only one that could provide us with bread for life. And this is beautifully shown to us in this symbolic picture of the 10 brothers that had to go down to Mitzrayim to get bread from their long-lost brother Joseph. Of course, Jacob didn't want to send Benjamin with him. That's why it was only the 10 brothers. So the sons of Jacob of Israel came to buy corn among the Mitzrayim people. And Joseph was the governor of the land, verse 6. And it was that he sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. Of course, they didn't know it's Joseph, but can you just remember when Joseph was still a young boy and he had this dream that he told his brothers and his father about, how the stalks on the cornfield when they were gathering corn, how the 11 corn stalks bowed themselves to the one corn stalk that was standing upright. And his brothers got so angry and jealous about that dream, and they said, "Do you think we are going to bow ourselves before you?" And remember, Jacob also wasn't very happy with Joseph's dreams. But he kept the dreams hidden in his memory, because he did know that dreams always has prophetic meanings. So it's just amazing how so many years later his dream is actually becoming true, proving that this was a dream that God gave to him. And here I'm sure that Joseph was standing there recognizing his brothers, but his brothers didn't recognize him. And the moment they bowed down to him, he must have just maybe sighed inside of him and maybe started crying inside of him, remembering how bad they treated him when he told them about this dream. And yet here in front of him, his dream just became reality. Verse 7, and Joseph saw his brothers, and he knew them, but made himself strange to them. So obviously he was a bit disguised. He had that Egyptian makeup on. He was 20 years older. He probably had a huge crown on his head. He was dressed in fine linen and clothes and robes. So there's no way that they could have recognized him. But the Bible says he also spoke roughly to them. So he spoke to them in a very harsh tone, making sure that he is the master and these guys are just like beggars. He really treated them a bit harshly. And he said to them, where do you come from? And they said, from the land of Canaan, to buy food. And Joseph knew his brothers, but they did not know him. And the same exact situation exists today. Ephraimites, right, or Joseph's seed, through his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, the 10 northern tribes, the lost tribes, the Gentiles. Joseph's seed can easily recognize Judah, but Judah cannot recognize the Gentiles as being their brothers. However, his Jewish brothers often couldn't recognize Joseph, just like they can't recognize us today, because of their strange Gentile names, because of our clean-shaven faces, because of the clothing we wear, the foods we eat, the holidays we keep, the lifestyles we keep. It is so strange to the Jewish people that they don't recognize the Gentiles that is returning to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as their brothers. Just like here, symbolically, Joseph's brothers did not recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams that he dreamed about them, and he said to them, you are spies. You have only come to see the secrets and the operations of the land. And of course, he knew that they weren't spies, but he wanted to treat them harshly. He wanted to test them. He was busy testing them to see, have they changed? Are they still so angry and bitter? Are they still so rough and unbending? So he was busy testing them. But he also thought, somewhere in his accusation there is a little bit of truth, because they were probably walking around in Egypt, looking around, seeing if they couldn't recognize Joseph anywhere. 20 years ago, they sold him into Egypt. Now, they wonder if he's still alive. Maybe he's still alive, and maybe he's a servant working somewhere. And as they were walking down the streets of Egypt, They were probably looking around, looking for their brother. So they were spies in some sense, trying to see if they can find their brother that they've sold like a slave a couple of years ago. But they said to him, "No, my master, but we are just here to buy food. That is why your servants came." And here they basically confirm that they are the servants and Joseph is the master. "We are all one man's sons. We are upright men. Your servants are not spies." And he said to them, "No, but to see the operation of the land is why you came." And they said, "Your servants are 12 brothers, my master, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And see, the youngest is this day with our father, and one of our brothers is no more." And I always wonder why they told him that. What was the reason why they told him about one younger brother being still at home and another brother that is just gone past? They probably thought the more information they gave him, the more believable they'll be in his eyes. And Joseph said to them, "That is what I spoke to you, saying that you are spies. But hereby you shall be proven." So he's going to give them a test now. "By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not go out from here, except you send your youngest brother to come down here." So this is a huge test, because if they were still as angry and bitter against Joseph and Benjamin because they were the favorite sons, then they would easily just give up Benjamin in Pharaoh's hand. But Joseph wanted to see if they still feel that way or if their hearts have changed. So he says to the brothers, "Send one of you and let him go and get your brother. And the rest of you shall be kept in prison, that your words may be proven, whether there be any truth in it. Or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies." So the test is, send one of your brothers back, go and fetch your youngest brother, so I can see if you really have a younger brother, and then I know that you are not spies. Otherwise, if you don't want to do that, then I know that you are spies. So he put all of them in prison for 3 days. Again, isn't it amazing? Why didn't he put them in prison for 3 weeks, or for 2 days, or for 8 days? But it's 3 days again. It's always so beautifully symbolic of the 3 days that Yeshua also spent in the prison of death. And Joseph said to them on the 3rd day, "This you must do so that you can live, for I fear Elohim." And this must have been strange for the Hebrew young men, because here is an Egyptian governor, and he said that he feared the Elohim of the Hebrews. He continues, "If you are an upright man, let one of your brothers be bound in the house of the prison, but go, carry corn for the famine of your houses." So again, here the Hebrew guys, the Hebrew brothers must have thought, it was bad to be in prison for 3 days. But first of all, he's letting us out of prison. He's only going to keep one of us in prison. The other 9 can go home. Secondly, he says that he's fearing the God of the Hebrews. Thirdly, he's allowing them to buy corn so that he can, so that they can take the corn back to their families, so that they don't starve because of the famine. Verse 20, "But bring your youngest brother to me, so shall your words be verified, and you shall not die." And they did so. And they said one to another. Remember, when they speak to each other, they are talking in the Hebrew language. So now they are busy talking to each other in the Hebrew language, and they didn't know that Joseph could understand them. And they said, "We are truly guilty concerning our brother Joseph, in that we saw the anguish of his being, when he begged us, and we would not listen. Therefore is this distress come upon us." So Joseph already could now hear that these guys are feeling ashamed and understanding that the wheel has turned, and the bad distress and anger and heartache that they caused Joseph is now coming back to them. And they said to each other, "Do you remember how he begged us? And now we are begging this governor." Joseph begged us for his life, and we are now begging this governor for our lives. So the wheel truly has turned. And Reuben answered them and said, Did not I warn you not to sin against the child Joseph? And you would not listen. Therefore, see now, his blood is required from us. And they knew not that Joseph understood them, for he spoke to them by an interpreter. So when Joseph spoke to them, there was an interpreter. He spoke in the Egyptian language, and the interpreter told them in Hebrew what he was saying. But in the meantime, he could understand everything they said. And he understood that they really had a change of heart. So it touched him deeply. Verse 24, and he turned himself around from them, and he wept. So he went away, and he started weeping. And he probably had to return to them, so he had to fix his makeup and, wash his face and all that. But he returned to them again, and he communed with them. And he took from them Shimeon, and he bound him before their eyes. So here he basically took Shimeon, and he bound him to put him in prison so that he can stay behind, and the rest of the brothers can go back and fetch the youngest brother. As believers, we can recognize the story of Joseph and his brothers on totally a different, deeper spiritual level. It has many similarities to the story of Yeshua. Like Joseph, Yeshua was rejected by the Jewish people. Like Joseph was rejected by his brothers. Like Joseph, Yeshua ended up, by and large, with the Gentiles, as Joseph ended up with the Egyptians. Yeshua's brothers, the Jewish people, do still not recognize him today. The weeping of Joseph tells us about the heart of the Master for his brothers, the Jewish people. The messianic significance of the Joseph story is further explored as we continue. And it's just beautiful for me to see how Messiah is prophesied in every part of the Old Testament history. In the lives of Abram, remember, Isaac, how many things in his life. Jacob, how many things in his life. Everything is always showing back to the Messiah. Verse 25, Then Joseph commanded them to fill their sacks with corn, and to restore every man's money back into his sack, and to give them provisions for the way. And this Joseph's servants did for his brothers. So not only did he let them come out of prison, not only did he allow them to return home with food, but he also put their money back into their sacks, and he gave them provision for the journey back home. So all these things should have shown these 10 brothers, listen, this guy is absolutely amazing. It's a huge surprise how this governor that is speaking so harshly to them and that is so suspicious of them, he believes in their God, he fears their God, he gave them corn, and he gave them food for the road. It's just amazing. And they loaded their donkeys with the corn, and they departed. And as one of them opened their sacks to give his donkey some food, he saw the money, for see, it was in his sack's mouth. And he said to his brother, My money is restored, and see, it is even in my sack. And their hearts failed them, and they were so afraid, saying one to another, What is this that Elohim has done to us? So they thought, of course, that Joseph is now going to think that they didn't pay for the food that they bought. Why would the money be back in their sacks? And again, they felt that God was punishing them for the evil they did to Joseph. So they came back to their father in the land of Canaan. They told him the whole story, and they said that they have to take Benjamin back if they want to go and buy food again. And Shimeon is still there. And Jacob, their father, verse 36, said to them, All of you have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is gone. Shimon is now gone. And now you want to take Benjamin away too? All these things you have done against me. And Reuben spoke to his father, saying, You can kill my 2 sons if I do not bring Shimeon back to you. Deliver him into my hands, and I will bring him to you again. Sorry, not Shimeon, but Benjamin. Deliver Benjamin into my hands, and I will bring him to you again. And Jacob said, My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If mischief befalls him, Benjamin, by the way in which you go, then you shall bring me down in my old age with sorrow to the grave. So Jacob basically said, I'm going to die if I have to lose Benjamin as well. So we see here that Reuben was prepared to sacrifice his 2 sons if he didn't bring Benjamin back. And we'll see in the next chapter 43, that Judah did the same. And if we remember that Judah was the one that also said, let's sell Joseph. And now that we know that in the prophetic, Judah symbolizes the Jews and they didn't recognize Joseph as his brother, just like the Jews don't recognize us today as their brothers. So it's amazing how Judah in the end were having a change of heart, and now how he was prepared to even give up his own sons in the place of Benjamin, really promising his father that he will look after Benjamin, the son of my right hand. Remember, Ben-Yamin, the son of my right hand. So it's beautiful how Judah's heart is turned. And we know the prophecies of the Messiah that says as well that, remember Romans 11, so all of Israel will be saved. When the Gentile branches are grafted into the olive tree, and the branches that has been broken off is grafted back into the olive tree. And now in Ezekiel 37, in the hand of the Messiah, the house of Joseph, the stick with the house of Joseph, and the stick with the house of Judah will be restored in the hand of the Messiah. But we'll discuss that again tomorrow.